Now, hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. On my YouTube channel, I talk about various aspects of compulsive sexual behaviors, prostitution, human trafficking. I speak to survivors of human trafficking, academics, authors, filmmakers, educators, and I'm very happy to be here today with someone quite renowned in this field, an expert who's a co-author of the book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, with Marsha Means, and I'm here today with Barbara Steffens, PhD. Hi, Barb, how are you?
Hi, good. I'm doing well.
All right, thanks for joining me. Let me just introduce you. Barb is a specialist in helping women recover from sexual and relational betrayal, and is a sought-after speaker and presenter on special issues related to partners of sex addicts. She is a retired mental health counselor and a board-certified coach. She was the founding president of the Association for Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, an organization that provides training and certification of clinical partner specialists and partner trauma coaches. Barb also consults with other professionals and provides training for those who want to help partners heal. She has trained professionals and faith providers from across the United States, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Singapore, and other locations around the world. She has also participated in and led events for partners who are seeking healing and support. Barb is a co-author of Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, the book I just showed you, How Partners Can Cope and Heal, which has dramatically affected change in the lives of those who are victims and the professionals who are trained to serve them. She is a pioneer in the field and calls herself the grandmother of those who have followed behind her to help partners heal. All right, well, thanks so much again, Barb, for being here. And I want to just start about finding out a bit about your personal journey into the work that you do. And how did you get into the field of sex addiction in general and working with partners of addicts in particular? Because even among therapists, I'm a registered psychotherapist, but it's a very niche, this is sort of a very niche sort of area even in our field. So how in the world did you
How
end
in the
up,
world?
how in the world, there's got to be a good story in there.
There is a good story, and it's like most of us, not all of us, but at least back in the day when I was doing it, we got into doing this work because we knew it was needed because we couldn't find what we needed. So I was at a point in my life, I was a mental health counselor and doing a lot of really good work, had worked with women and children, adolescents, staff of a large church, all sorts of fun things using my profession.
Hmm.
And a thing happened. All of a sudden, one day, life just turned upside down because of things that I discovered. And that set me on the course of, first of all, trying to figure out what in the world was this. I
Hmm.
could tell through my own discovery that this was a pattern of behavior. It wasn't just a one time off kind of activity. So I automatically understood it as addiction. And
You
so
did.
then I went looking for, where do I find support for me? Because I was not functioning. I was having a hard time focusing. I was experiencing emotions that were just not normal for me,
Hmm.
even in stressful times. And I recognized my symptoms as being at least, acute stress, if not something different. And when I went to go try to find help, I went to someone who was running groups for men at the time, who were
Running
struggling.
groups for men, not
Yeah, this.
only for men. Okay.
Yeah, I talked to a friend who was running groups at a church for men who were struggling, and I asked him where was a support group for me. And he handed me some books, and I started to read them. And I was confused and really kind of upset with what I was reading because it was describing me without ever meeting me and making assumptions about my history, my upbringing, um, things that could have happened to me without
Mhm.
ever assessing me. And I knew in mental health, we don't do that. We
Right.
listen to the individual and understand that there's, a variety of ways that people get to places where they are. And this this was something that happened to me.
Mhm. And
So that just,
what
you
was
know,
it telling you? What was it telling you about yourself?
well, it was telling me that, first off, I was in shock. And I recognized some trauma in myself in terms of how I was responding, because I work with trauma survivors as a clinician. So I recognized that. I took really good care of myself, but had to work really hard to find someone that would just listen to me and help me through the crisis, do crisis intervention with me. Rather than, I remember one very nice gentleman I met with, and he said, "Well, tell me about your relationship with your father." And I said, "This has nothing to do with my father. I
Right,
was just lied to and betrayed by my spouse."
right.
And he said, "Well, we find that women who find themselves in these relationships have blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Well,
Mm,
you may find that, but that is not me, and that's not what I need." So I
mhm,
did not go back to that person.
mhm.
But so I was not finding what I needed and went back to my friend who gave me all these books that I really did not like. And I said, "So where's the group for me again?" And he said, "When are you going to start it?" So I just opened myself, became available in the basement of a church for women who were with the men who were going to his group. And I learned so much from them in terms of what they were experiencing. I
Right,
started asking them, "What was it like the first time you found out?"
right.
And the descriptions were violent, in terms of, it was like someone ransacking my house. It was like being stabbed in the back 100 times. It was like when the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York City and everything just collapsed. So
Wow.
really violent, traumatic descriptions of their experience.
Mhm.
So as I got more healed up, um, and I started working with this population of women wanting to support them, I really saw that there was a gaping hole in our field in terms of being able to appropriately respond in
Right,
a trauma-informed way to these betrayed people. And
right.
that led me then to go back and get my doctorate and do the research that then led to the basis of your sexually addicted spouse. So it's a longer journey than what I just described, but it was out
Yeah.
of my own felt need,
Mm,
as well as I started working with women, hearing their felt need and really hearing and observing the trauma that they experienced. And
yeah.
so my research showed that it was really 70% of the women that were in my study met all of the criteria for post-traumatic stress.
So, yeah, so let's talk about, I want to jump to this idea of being a co-addict versus
Mhm.
um, being traumatized. And so for people watching that aren't quite clear yet on what I'm talking about, I work with mostly men who engage in compulsive pornography use, masturbation, serial affairs, sexting, texting, cam girls, paying for sex, strip clubs, phone sex, not so much now, but there's that, massage parlors, and often this goes on for a period of many years, and
Mhm.
there's always a double life, and there's always secrets and lies about that.
Mhm.
And so that's what we're talking about specifically here. And so when we talk about partners, we're referring to mostly the women who are girlfriends or wives of those men. Although sometimes, although it can work the other way around, where it can be the woman who is acting out with compulsive behaviors. Same-sex couples, a partner is a partner. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter.
Partner is a partner.
Partner is a partner. So just to clarify what we're talking
Mhm.
about here, because some people come to this not knowing a lot about what I do, and some have no idea really about what I do. So
Yeah.
just wanted to throw that in. So um, when I started in this field, if you were married to an addict, say an alcoholic or a sex addict, you were a co-addict was the common terminology, and this comes out of, and I'm gonna let you explain it better, but it comes out of generally the AA sort of 12-step model is what I
Correct.
understand. And you really pioneered, you and your colleagues and Marge are writing this book, you really sort of pioneered a new conceptualization of how being sexually betrayed impacts a partner. So can you contrast those two things and sort of flesh that out for us a bit, Barb?
Hmm. I'm trying to figure out how to do it in the shortest manner as possible. But
You can take
basically,
your time.
that's what I was reacting to personally as I was reading information, being labeled something based upon someone else's behaviors. And we don't do that anyplace else in mental health. Yes, we may call someone codependent, but I did a lot of research on codependency even, and even that is descriptive of people trying to find ways to become safe or to feel safer in unsafe situations. And so the co-addiction model really describes some of the behaviors, but then kind of put this frame of it that it was the partner's own kind of addictive or compulsive behavior to be angry, to refuse to be sexual, to ruminate on what happened to them, that this was their own compulsive or addictive behavior.
Mhm.
And as a trained mental health clinician, I was seeing this is what traumatized people do, regardless of the kind of trauma. They ruminate, they have intrusive thoughts, they can't put their thoughts away. Their brain is still trying to make sense out of something that makes no sense.
Mhm.
They have flashbacks, they have nightmares, they don't feel sexually safe, and so they don't want to be sexual with someone, or they now, because they've been sexually betrayed,
Right.
someone's been faithful in a way, they don't
Right.
feel safe enough to be sexual, or they feel less than,
Mhm.
and they're afraid to be sexual. So it's not their addictive behaviors or compulsive behaviors. It is common trauma responses that we see in these individuals because we know the event of discovery and we know the event of finding out and experiencing not feeling safe
Mhm.
in a relationship where there's an expectation and a need for safety,
Mhm.
a child and caregiver, a spouse and a loved one, then that's betrayal. And it's about the same time I was doing my research just on trauma and partners, another professor, Dr. Jennifer Fried, was doing research on betrayal trauma, and the two go together really well. Her research was on how children are traumatized in a setting where they can't escape because they're dependent. But then she also did research on how it's the same with adult relationships because there's an expectation of safety. It's
Yeah.
harder to leave, especially if they're, let's say it's a woman and she has small children, but
Yes.
that it's not just you can escape from something.
Mhm.
So there's an expectation, there's a level of interdependence or depending upon one another, but there is a dependent kind of relationship because that's what happens when you join
Yes.
with someone, when you make a commitment, you are working together. And so you're
Yes.
dependent on each other. And so
Yeah.
that's betrayal trauma. But those are the differences. Co-addiction came out of the addiction model. And what we're talking is much more trauma informed and understanding that this isn't because of some deficit or even addiction in the person who is betrayed.
Mm.
Responding how traumatized people respond.
Right.
The difference here, and I'll give this example and then we'll pause. In the United States, especially in some of our southern states, we get a lot of hurricanes. And when
Hurricane.
a hurricane's coming, you get some warning, you can see it coming, you
Right.
prepare hopefully, and then the hurricane leaves.
Right.
Then the first responders come. But when it's a partner who's betrayed in a committed relationship, you can't just, you know, unboard the doors and the windows. You still are not safe, even if now you know what happened.
Yes.
It's not like a hurricane that's blown out. It's still there and
Right.
it's still messy. And
Right.
so there's this prolonged period of not feeling safe and feeling traumatized. So it's not just a one-time event.
Mhm.
It's much more ongoing and having several experiences of that and several layers of not feeling safe. So
Yeah.
that's a long answer, but that's the difference. We're talking about trauma
Yes.
versus someone who's betrayed having their own addiction. They do not. Every once in a while, we'll find one that has an addiction of some sort or another, but that's separate and apart from the betrayal and the trauma.
Yeah, well, and the way I see that showing up in, let's say, a therapy session, like if you're not a trauma-informed therapist, especially about betrayal trauma, is you end up saying things as the therapist to the client, like, well, maybe if you gave him more sex, then
Mhm.
he wouldn't have to look at porn, or you maybe if you watch porn with him, he wouldn't have to look at porn.
Have to. Yeah.
Or, are you sure you're not, are you a little uptight? Maybe you're riding him a little bit hard. Like, I know you're checking his phone for texts of other women, but isn't that an invasion of his privacy, right?
Mhm.
So this is an important distinction because, like you said a minute ago, this isn't a deficit in the partner, Sure, they're not a perfect person. Sure, they have flaws and are probably doing things in the relationship maybe that aren't great either, but that's not the point.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
The point is they were just living their life in good faith, trusting that their partner was an honest person.
Mhm.
And then they have this discovery. And why is betrayal of this kind so traumatic? Like what sets that apart from something that's like, I don't know, maybe a husband has a bit of a gambling problem, or he spent some money and didn't tell his wife about it, or he lied about a fishing trip with his friends. Like, I mean, none of
Mhm.
that's good either, but what is so traumatic about this in your experience?
Well, in betrayal kind of trauma, in relational trauma, we can call it that.
Mm,
It's the expectation that this person that says they love me has my back and does not do things to put me at risk. And if they do, they acknowledge it and they apologize for it. Um, but it's something that's out there and you can discuss it, and there's an ability for repair. But when partners find out about their loved one's betrayal through sexual activities, by the time the partner finds out, either discovers or it's disclosed to them in some way, it's been going on for a period of time. In my study, the average length of time the secret was being kept was 15 years.
15. Okay.
15, can you imagine being in a relationship believing that this is the person I know and I love, and I see them and I see them make mistakes and I see them owning up to some mistakes, but I don't see them living a whole separate life that I know nothing of, that
Right.
puts me at risk physically, sexually, financially, relationally,
Mm,
all of those ways. And so it's much more devastating because it is as if I'm married or with someone that I don't know.
mm.
And so part of the trauma is the shattering of what I think reality is.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
some
Shatter.
of the hardest stuff for a partner to start to regain is what is real. And so you'll hear them say nothing's real anymore, or I don't know what's real. I don't know who to trust. I don't think I'll ever trust myself again. So
Right.
it's a level of shattering because there's this expectation that this person is being open and honest with me, and they're not. In fact, they are putting you at risk and you have no idea. And by risk, I don't necessarily mean physical, but it can be physical. It's financial, it's relational, it's all of the ways that you can be put into risk.
Yeah. Transmitting STDs,
Yeah,
STIs. Right.
yeah, yeah. And just that idea of that level of deception. So the partner is thinking, how could I even have decided to be with someone that could deceive me to this level? How could they deceive me this long and in these ways? And then they start to question themselves as well. What's wrong with me that I didn't pick up on this? Am I
Yeah.
ever going to be able to trust my own intuition again?
Yeah.
And what I always say is you do trust yourself right now. It's just hard to trust, and we're going to help you restore that.
Yeah.
But this didn't happen because you weren't savvy enough. It happened because someone was working really hard to hide things from you.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the old co-addict, like with the alcoholic, let's say,
Mhm.
you know, m- if you're married to an alcoholic, like, you might not know every time he drinks, and he probably
Right.
lies about his
There's
drinking,
symptoms.
but, like, he staggers in at 3 a.m. and passes out on the floor.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a secret.
Right.
And then, but I think what you see sometimes in those situations is the partner will call in to work for him the next day. So this
Mhm.
is where we get the enabling thing coming
Right.
in, right? The co-addict enabling, hello, sorry, my husband can't come into work. He's sick today. He wanted me to let you know, right?
Mhm.
But I have never come across a partner who called in for their husband to say, he can't come into work because he's been up watching porn all night and masturbating and he's too tired to do anything. Have you? Because
No.
I've never heard that. And
Yeah.
that's where the comparison breaks down to me,
Yeah.
and
Well, and I would say, even if someone married to an alcoholic and they're calling and they're covering for their spouse, they're also protecting themselves, because if
yeah,
I out my spouse, they're going to get fired. That's going to hurt me.
right.
So I don't even consider that to be a co-addict or
Oh,
even
okay.
codependent. We are just trying to figure out, how are we going to survive this horrific situation? And they're doing the best they can. So people that know me well know that I don't even use the word codependency.
You don't use it?
It's all attempts to, how can I be safe or increase my sense of safety?
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
yeah. So I don't label it.
So what's the difference between, well, I think we've kind of covered that, co-addict and codependent, and
Mhm.
how those are, it's sort of outdated terms in a sense. I think it's
Yeah, I think the field has really shifted, that
yeah,
mostly trauma informed now in working with the betrayed spouse, the betrayed partner. Sometimes they will say they're trauma informed, but they'll still talk codependency or co-addict language. So someone who's looking for help, you just ask questions around, what model do you work from? And then what training have you received to help you function in this model? It's
sure.
one thing to say, I know how to work with partners. It's another thing to say, and I've done the hard work to develop a specialty by getting extra specific training so that I'm doing a good job and not adding more harm.
Yes. Yeah, no, great point. So for partners watching this, because I really have that in mind as doing this
Mm,
interview with you,
yeah.
run us through the impact specifically about that this has on partners, because there's going to be people watching this that are like, am I crazy for staying up till 2 a.m. going through phone records? Am I crazy for putting a tracker on his truck? Okay, all true stories that I'm sure you've heard before
Oh,
too.
sure.
Am I crazy for, checking his phone 3 times a day? Am I crazy because I don't believe a single thing he says? So just take us through sort of the list of ways that this betrayal trauma shows up.
Mhm. Well, it shows up like any other kind of trauma might show up, where you have intrusive thoughts and you have this sense of not being safe. And what partners will say is, I never want to not know again. And
Mm,
so part of how they are created, how their brain is wired, how their body works, is trying to have a sense of, am I safe right now or not? So they're hyper vigilant. And so they're looking for, evidence to, do I know it all? Because I know I don't ever want to not know again. So they'll just get in these periods of having to look or search to find, is there more? That's a very, very common response. It would be very similar to someone who's been through an earthquake. All of a sudden, a loud car goes by and it shatters, kind of makes the room move a little bit, and they're going to think it's an earthquake again. So
right.
they're hypervigilant, and that's a safety response that's just in your body, in your nervous system. So there's that. There's for some partners, they will say that they feel a level of anger
Mm,
or rage, even, that they've never experienced before. So they'll say, I don't even know myself anymore. When am I going to get myself back? Um,
yes.
and again, anger or rage is a protective. It's saying something is not right. Something is going on that should not go on. And so the anger serves as a protection. A lot of times partners get, trying to think of a good word, they are made to feel badly for being angry, that there's something wrong with them, especially
Yeah,
if their anger has peaks of rage or is extended over a period of time. And what I want to say is your anger is there for a reason, so explore it. Where are you still not feeling safe? Because anger
yes,
again is a protection. So if there's something that's still not you're feeling safe about, talk about that and
yeah.
find some kind of remedy to help yourself feel safe, and that anger can reduce. But anger is a protection. It's not a bad thing.
And I
It's
just,
not a bad thing.
I want to throw a quick comment in for people of faith here that come from churches that
Mhm,
don't really do a good job of giving space for emotions, and they
mhm,
quote things like, in your anger, do not sin, and the
mhm,
fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace.
mhm.
That's all true, but not helpful right now because
Yeah.
anger is a God-given emotion, if you want to say it that way. That is a messenger to give us information. So
Mhm.
I just thought
Yeah.
I'd throw that in because, I find that this messaging comes out in faith communities and
Yeah.
it's psychologically helpful.
Yeah. I've worked with so many partners from faith communities. I'm a person of faith myself.
Mm,
And that's a big area where they feel a lot of shame
right.
for some of the natural, normal responses that they're going to have to not feeling safe. So know that anger is okay.
Yeah.
Uh, Jesus was angry. God was angry, is angry. When things are not right,
Yeah.
this is not right. So someone that's going to help you is going to help you figure out, how do you keep yourself safe when you can't trust this other person to do so. So that's what good support and recovery work is going to do for you, is to help you get strong and empowered so you can protect yourself, because now you know that there's a potential risk there.
Mhm.
Even if he says over and over again, I've stopped, I'm a new person, I'm never going to do it again,
Mm.
most partners who continue in the relationship continue knowing full well that now I know that this person has the capacity to do this. And
Yes.
so it's on me to get as strong as I can and take good actions to protect myself. So it's very empowering. It's a very healing process. It's
Yes.
also a normal thing that happens after any other kind of traumatic event. Our goal is restoration, but also growth
Mhm.
and traumatic growth
Mhm.
and resilience. And so we gain strength on the other end of this. But
Mhm.
at the beginning of it, it's a mess and your whole body is traumatized. So we talked about anger, we talked about hypervigilance, we talked about intrusive thoughts. It can impact sleep, eating, all of those kinds of physiological responses, not trusting yourself, not trusting anybody, believing that I'll never trust anyone again, even changed beliefs, the things that we held to be true, um, those can get um, a little altered after trauma as well, because those beliefs didn't protect me, whatever that belief was. This is a safe place, this is a safe person. God is here for me and he will always protect me.
Right.
And now this happens. So how do I make sense of that? So that's also a trauma response, is trying to make sense of and coming to, what do I now believe to be true?
Mhm.
Were my beliefs wrong? Probably not. I had every reason to believe this, but maybe I need to
Right.
add something to those beliefs.
I
Um,
like that.
but those are all real normal kinds of trauma responses that we see, especially betrayal trauma, because in our situation, the people that you and I have worked with, the individuals, it's not like you're assaulted and you never see that person again. They're
Right.
in a relationship. Frequently, they're still living under the same roof. They're trying to coexist
Yes.
with someone who just put everything at risk. And that makes it much more difficult for the partner, the injured party, to start to recover from the trauma, because it's not like it's all over.
Yes.
They're
Well,
going to slip, they're going to share a lie, they're going to gaslight a little bit, lie, distort reality. And so there's going to be this sense of not feeling safe for quite a long period of time, even when that person who did the betraying goes to get help and they're doing better, but they still may make mistakes. They may slip, they may fall. And so that there's still not a sense of, okay, the earthquake's gone now. It's
Yeah.
aftershock after aftershock for them.
And I heard it described as the person you most want comfort from is the source of your pain.
Yeah.
So it creates a conundrum, right?
Yeah. Yeah, when I did my research, I asked for comments from the women who were in the study, and one of them said, "I loved my husband and I wanted his um, comfort, yet he was the source of my searing pain." So that's one of my ladies
Right.
study.
Yeah.
But that describes an attachment trauma as well, doesn't it? When we're
Yes.
attached, we're close. This is my go-to person. But
Yeah.
now you can't be my go-to person because you just shattered my life. So
Yeah.
when I'm hurting, I want to go, and yet I can't because you're not safe. So there's this back and forth. And that's where I hear a lot of women say, I feel crazy. Why in the world would I want him to hug me when I want to slug him at the same time? What in the world is going on? I must be losing my mind. No,
Yes.
that's an attachment trauma. That's an attachment rupture. And it makes sense.
Can you speak to the sex after betrayal? I see partners become hypersexual, hyposexual,
Mhm.
everything in between. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that sometimes we underestimate the level of sexual trauma that our partners experience. So, like if you were a helper, please listen for that and normalize that. If you are a partner who's been betrayed, understand that trauma is not just things that we're thinking. It's also our sexual selves, and this is a sexual violation, so it makes sense that some of the symptoms that you might have are similar to other kinds of sexual trauma symptoms. And those include, so if it was a sexual assault, if it was childhood sexual abuse, we still see the same kinds of symptoms where it can be you know avoidance or hypersexual, or kind of a mixture of that. It can take all different kinds of forms. So there's some books and articles out there about sexual trauma in general that I think partners can find really helpful. But I know that a lot of the books that are out now for partners discuss that. So know that that's a normal response.
Why might a partner suddenly want to have a lot of sex with their husband right after finding out he's betrayed her?
For some partners, it can be a lot of different things. For some partners, maybe they haven't spoken for a long time. They haven't felt emotionally close. And now all of a sudden, we're having these really, really deep conversations. And I actually feel more connected to you now than I did before. And so they
Oh,
may want to be more sexual then. For some partners, I've heard them say it's the only time I feel any semblance of being closer connected to anyone. And so there's this draw to feeling close. For other partners, it may be I am just not feeling lovable. I'm not feeling like I am a wanted sexual being, and so I want to be sexual to prove that I am desirable. A lot of partners will have a belief that I'm not enough, otherwise my loved one would not have strayed from the relationship or acted out in these ways. And
mhm,
so it can have a variety of reasons. So my suggestion would be just explore it. What's it about? For
mhm.
you, if it's you, if you're the helper, gently ask the person, what do you think that's about for you?
What would
And
you what sorry, what would you say to the partner who says, I know if I give him sex whenever he wants it, it'll keep him from watching porn?
yeah, I understand that as a desire and a hope, but my question to you is, did it keep him from doing it before?
Mhm.
And I do it in a very, very gentle, understanding way. If that had worked before, you wouldn't be where you are. It's not about sex. Sex addiction is not about needing more sex. Sex is what that person has learned to do to manage their internal issues, pain, It's a process kind of addiction. It's a behavior addiction. So it's really not about sex.
You said something a second ago about how it's a sexual betrayal or sexual trauma. Explain for the guys watching now who have only watched porn, because I have a lot of clients like this who haven't actually ever acted out with another human being.
Mhm.
How them watching porn and masturbating is a sexual trauma to their partner, because in their mind, they're not having an affair, they're not hurt. I mean, you've heard all the justifications for
Oh,
this,
yeah.
but they really deeply, deeply believe this, right?
Mhm.
How are they sexually traumatizing their wife by just watching pornography?
Well, their spouse is sexually traumatized because it's still engaging sexually with something, someone outside of the relationship.
Mm,
And sometimes it's in ways, some of the behaviors may include behaviors that are not between these two individuals and their sexual relationship. And so that can be sexually traumatized. Sometimes someone who is only using porn will bring some of those kinds of activities into the relationship, the sexual relationship. And then the partner realizes, oh, this is why he wanted that or did
mm,
that. It's because
yeah.
he was bringing it from here now into our relationship. And that can be traumatizing.
Mm,
Remember, and I think this is in our book, a woman saying to me one time, and her husband, it was only porn. She said, it's like when I go to bed and think I'm going to be sexual with my spouse, it's like there's 1,000 other women in the room.
mm, yes. Yeah.
And so that's how. And they're going to be measuring themselves. Am I adequate, not adequate? It's all the things. I hear the same thing from men who were betrayed, sexually betrayed by their spouses.
Mhm.
They feel inadequate, not enough, and so it's just a normal response to having someone sexually betray you
Yeah.
is sexual trauma.
Yeah. What about when partners or just people, but sometimes it's partners that say sex addiction's BS, it's not real, it's just an excuse. And they're just hiding behind this. And yeah, what do you make of that? So I hear this fairly often, stop making excuses for your behavior.
Well, if someone is saying that it's an excuse, like if someone who has been sexually acting out says, "Well, I'm a sex addict, I can't help it," that is using it as an excuse.
Oh, I see.
So, but describing it as an addiction is helpful, but just because it's an addiction doesn't mean that there aren't good ways to avoid those behaviors, and
Yes.
that it's the individual's responsibility to utilize the tools that are there
Mm,
to help them
yes.
um, come back to integrity for themselves.
Mhm.
So it's not an excuse, it's a description.
Right.
If someone's using it as an excuse, you can call them out on it. That's no excuse. Yes, it's
Yeah.
real, but you're
Yeah.
still responsible. It is not okay with me if
Yeah.
this continues. If you want it to continue, you may,
Yeah.
but it's not okay with me. And I will have to make choices to protect myself.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of feel the same way, and of all the guys I've worked with, it's never, at least not guys who work with me, it
Mhm.
doesn't get used as an excuse.
No,
It's
it's a
used as an
description.
explanation. It's an explanation, and
Yeah,
if
it's
they
an
try to
explanation.
use if they try to use it as an excuse, it doesn't go very far with me.
No, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
and
think so. And they're not going to go very far if it's a just an excuse for them, because that
well,
means that they don't want to make a change in their behavior yet.
yeah, and I hear that a lot with addicts who are also abusive.
Hmm.
I think this is a form of abuse, but I mean like real narcissistic abusers.
Hmm.
That is a whole other animal.
Right.
And when they are also sex addicts, they love to latch on to that label
Hmm.
specifically to excuse their behavior,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
that's very different than someone like the vast majority of guys I work with are just like normal, regular guys, nice guys, hardworking, love their wife and kids, provide for their families, and they're
Yes.
appalled at their behaviors. They hate themselves for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're kind of relieved when they have a label for it because it helps explain some things.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the other person that you're describing, the person where this is an excuse for their behavior and they tend to be abusive as well, and they really don't have any intent to making any change. Not really.
Oh,
And the work for the partner, for the person who's betrayed, is how am I going to take good care of and protect myself?
right,
This person is showing me that that's not a high value for them and how they're acting and behaving toward me and towards the rest of life. That
right,
I'm not in that sphere.
right.
And that's a hard reality,
Yes,
but it is now becoming a reality. So now what can you do to help yourself?
yes,
Um, Sometimes it would be really, really nice if the other person would just change and then everything would be better. But this is one of those crises in life where part of the goal for the betrayed person is, how am I going to take this time to grow into the strongest, best person that I can be for myself? And to almost get a little selfish, that I need to take care of me because something happened. Someone wasn't looking out for my welfare here. So
yeah,
I need to make sure that I can do that for myself.
mm,
And the partners who have support enough to dig into that do really, really well.
mhm, mhm,
It's not so much like, well, he's over there and now I have to heal myself and I'm all alone and it's all on me and there's something wrong with me. It's not that at all. What I'm describing is that should never, ever, ever have happened,
mhm,
but it did.
yes,
So, what are we going to do with that? Here's an opportunity. Everything's blown apart. Here's an opportunity. What would you like it to look like for yourself in the future? You
yes,
don't get there right away. If you are a helper and you start with that, you're going to miss that partner. You have to start with her in her heap of pain and being distraught and traumatized.
mm,
But our goal is, after really holding that person in that kind of pain, then gently start helping them kind of rebuild and define who do they want to be now.
I like that.
Because when discovery happens, it's a point in time. Everything changes.
Yeah, yeah,
Good crisis intervention and good trauma work says, we are going to start with you there and we're going to help you there.
mhm,
But we know you don't want to stay there. So eventually, we're going to gently encourage you to
mm,
get strong and become who you want to be.
yeah,
And maybe that person will still be there. That's
mm,
our hope.
yeah,
And maybe they won't.
beautiful. Yeah, I like that. Partner comes to you and says, I just found out last week my husband's been having affairs, looking at porn and going to massage parlors for the last 15 years. He says he's getting help, he's seeing a therapist. How do I know he's going to get better? The question of the day, isn't it? What do you say? And for women watching this right now, what can you say to them?
It's so hard not being able to know what the future is going to be. We hope he's going to get better, and that's going to depend on how much he wants to get better.
Mm,
You can say, this is essential for me for you to get better because this is not okay with me.
mm,
That's helpful for you. It can be helpful for him too, to be
mm,
able to say, I am hoping and praying you're going to get better.
mm,
And in order for me to be here, I'm going to have to know you're working on it.
mm,
Um, but time is the only way of knowing for sure
mhm,
because he has to make choices. He has to do his hard work.
mhm,
You can encourage him, you can hope for that, but it's not guaranteed.
mhm,
It's not guaranteed. It's our hope. But here's some things that you can look for as kind of signposts. These are observables. It's not like you're controlling him getting there, but you're listening for things like, I'm learning things about myself, or, oh, I got to make sure I get to group tonight. They're motivated to do those things. I talk to partners about looking for a trend line. So that's going to be ups and downs, but you're looking for over time
Mm,
that that person's heart and posture is, I want to be better.
mhm,
If they are not moving in the direction of, I want to be better,
mhm.
then that's when we're saying, what are you going to do to make sure that you're going to be okay,
Right.
no matter what he does? But if he really wants to change, he can.
So what other, you mentioned going to a group, what other behaviors should partners be looking for specifically?
I like to suggest that they work with an individual. Group may not be enough for some. For some, it may be. But look for an individual who is trained in helping someone with compulsive sexual behaviors,
Mm,
at least for a period of time, because there's some good tools and support is necessary. Getting honest
mhm,
is necessary. And in group, you have levels of honesty, but working one on one with someone, you can go deeper with what your struggles are and come up with solutions that are unique to you.
mm,
So, having an individual trained counselor or recovery coach, I
mhm,
think would be an essential.
mhm.
And then you want to see them. Um, a lot of times partners, because again we want to know so that we don't ever not know again. We read lots and lots of books and then we say, you need to read this book and you need to read this book. What I usually suggest to a partner is to say, I can be a resource for you if you want to ask me questions about materials I've seen that I think might be helpful. I'm glad to share that with you.
Right.
And then that puts the ownership on him to say, yes, I want information, rather than you feeling like I always have to be telling him what to do next. If
Right.
he's not starting to take responsibility and ownership of getting well,
Mm,
then it's going to be really difficult.
right.
I
What?
knew in my situation that if I could not see that my husband wanted to get well for himself, not just to maintain the relationship,
Yeah.
it was not going to be adequate unless his heart needed it for him.
Yeah. Did he recover and you guys made it?
We are having our 50th wedding anniversary this month.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. So yeah, he did. He is.
Yeah. Amazing. That's
Yeah.
great. What do you think of the three C's of recovery for partners? So we tell partners you didn't cause this, you can't cure it, you can't control it. And then I want to maybe lead that into how do you help them heal? So how do you help the hyper vigilant partner staying up till 2 in the morning, looking at phone records, controlling his recovery to getting to a place where she doesn't feel the need to do that?
Well, I use different words than controlling it. So
Okay.
that's
You
where I don't use the 3 C's too much,
okay.
because for me it's not she's trying to control his recovery. She's trying to control or have a say in her level of safety.
Okay.
So it's controlling her own environment. So
Okay.
I may say, how is staying up all hours of the night searching for more information, how is that helping you feel better for yourself? I
Right.
might ask the question, do you have enough information now to know it's really bad?
Mhm.
And then I might introduce the idea of, what if there is a way in this process that we can get all of your questions answered through a planned therapeutic disclosure process that's part of a healing process for both of you, where
Yes.
he intentionally, in a planned way, puts together a timeline. And
Mm,
then, in a prepared and supported way, you receive that information directly from him rather than having to go and find it. What would that be like? And if they know that that's a possibility, sometimes that helps
yes.
calm things down. And so in APSATs and in our training with our clinicians and coaches, we really want to urge that process just as soon as the recovering person can manage doing that for
Right.
the spouse, for the partner, so that they are not in this space of having all these questions and needing answers to their questions.
Right.
So I think a planned therapeutic disclosure as soon as possible is a real help for that. I also find some partners where they have this need to be up and asking a lot of questions or hunting for a lot of information is sometimes just some good trauma work helps that. So some EMDR, some brain spotting or other kinds of trauma techniques can be helpful because the brain is just on fire. And so it just needs some help in calming down.
Right.
Writing down the questions and holding them for a period of time. So helping them come up with other ways of managing that impulse to, I need to know everything.
Right.
It's a very common experience, so I never shame it. I don't say that there's anything wrong with it. I
Yeah.
will ask the question, is it helping me right now? Or
Right.
how is it helping you? What are other things that might help you?
Yeah.
What do you know? And we may even draw a picture of the things that they do know.
Mm.
And so that gives them a sense of a frame that
Mm.
they do know enough to know that it's bad and that it's not okay.
Yeah.
And then what can they do in that period of time and not knowing to make sure they feel as safe as possible?
Right.
So working on safety for them can help reduce some of that.
What if they think it is helping them? Like they're saying yes because I keep finding out more and I need to know. So
Mhm.
this is very helpful for me.
Yeah. Then I might say, okay, what are some other things that might add to it, to things that are helpful for you? Because
Yeah.
if they're doing other things, I find that that may replace that need.
Right.
I never shame a partner for wanting to know what the truth is.
Yeah. Well, I heard it conceptualized as seeking safety, right? And I've explained this to guys
Mhm.
more times than I can count.
Yeah.
And like, I don't tell me what you think about this. This is how I say it. I say, listen, to you, I'm talking to the guy. I know to you that this seems like nagging, interrogating, endless questionings, drilling you for more, bugging you, text spamming you, and it gets very annoying. But you're the one that traumatized her, and all of these behaviors are her seeking safety. She
Yes.
needs to feel safe, and that's why you have to validate. I drill into them the AVR: acknowledge, validate, reassure. Thank you, Coach Carol, right?
Exactly.
Is that a good way to explain it? Because
A Absolutely.
that usually clicks with the guy.
Yeah. It's they're trying to find out what is reality.
Yeah,
And so any kind of reassurances, so I know that you are asking me all these things because I deceived you and lied to you. It is
yeah,
on me.
right.
And I want you to know that right now I'm being as honest as I can be. I'm working with my person on
Mm.
coming up with a full list that I want to share with you in a controlled, safe way to help myself as well as help you understand.
Right.
But yes, this is all on me. I am so sad that you are hurting this badly, and I did this. So all of those kinds of things, and understand that it can be something that triggers, traumas have triggers, they're reminders.
Mm.
And so part of the trigger is he's behaving in a way that now I connect with how he behaved when he was deceiving me. And
Yes.
so maybe ask, what what happened today that or what can I be doing more of to help you feel safer during the day?
Yes.
What can I initiate doing to help you feel safer? Because I really want you to feel safe. I want you to know that you're safe. What can I do? And
Yeah.
so that's eliciting, not rather than telling someone they're safe all the time, but it's eliciting, what is she missing
Mm.
to help her feel safe? What would help? Is it connection? Is it, instead of her texting him all the time, would it help if he texted her several times a day?
Sure.
So, but it's taking the ownership on himself to
Yeah.
help her feel safe. Now, he can do everything in the world, and there's still going to be a period of time where she's traumatized, and of course, she doesn't feel safe.
Yes. Yes. I want to really get your perspective on the whole check-in thing. Okay, so what I generally, when I have the opportunity, okay, whether I meet the partner or not, I usually get a guy to start doing this, but I like to get partners' input on this. But I early in recovery explained to the guy I'm working with that you kind of both have valid but opposite needs at this point. Your needs are to work your recovery with dignity and not feel like you're being, blasted every day with questions and all that. And even though that's safety seeking, but you have that need to be able to take your space and work through this.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's involving trauma work ultimately, because most sex addicts have trauma. But she has a need to be in the loop, know what's going on, have regular updates on your bottom. I work with bottom lines with guys, like, here's the behaviors we're not doing, and not feel like she's the porn cop or the private investigator and all that. So what I usually do is get him to come up with I get the partner to say how often she wants to check in, and I give him almost a script, and I
Mhm.
say, okay, can we check in? Sure. I want you to know my bottom lines are good. No porn, no masturbation, no lies or secrets, no inappropriate contact with other people. A few triggers today. I had euphoric recall. I was bored and stressed, and what I did is, call my sponsor, read listen to a recovery podcast. Do you have any questions for me, kind of thing. So that, and sometimes I gotta work with that a bit because it's too much information. It's not enough information. And I want you to speak particularly to the level of how to work out the level of detail and information to share, because what happens is he's in good faith trying to reassure her and keep her up to speed. And he mentions that while he was at work, there was an attractive woman that walks in, and she's so triggered it leads to a 2-hour fight over who's this woman, what was her name, what was she wearing, did you talk to her? And then he just breaks down, and then the whole thing kind of becomes counterproductive. Now, that doesn't always happen, but I just like to hear your perspective on that whole thing. You get what I'm talking about, right?
I do. I
Yeah,
think that the partner needs to be very involved in asking for what she needs and
okay.
what is not helpful for her, so that he is not sharing things that she does not want to have right now, or knows herself that would not be helpful for her. Some partners don't want to check in, they
No,
just want to observe. And so be flexible enough in terms of what would be helpful for the partner, and to know that that can change over time. So I would not want to hear my husband say, well, there was an attractive woman at work today, and so I might say, if that happens, just tell me something like, and I contacted my sponsor a couple of times for things that were triggering for me.
okay,
So helping the partner identify what's going to be triggering for her.
okay.
What is it that she is looking for to know that he is on that trend line?
Mhm.
And then make decisions on what's shared based on what's going to help her,
Right,
or him see that that trend line is in place, that he is doing, he's moving in the right direction. But that's going to take good support and information for the partner too, to know that in reality, recovery is a very messy thing, and it's very, very hard. You think about any other kind of addictive behavior. Um, it's just very difficult. And so it's not just stopping a behavior, it's adding new behaviors. So
yes.
make sure that's what's being shared as, these are the positive things I did. These are, not only reaching out to my sponsor because I was in trouble,
Mm,
but this is the book I read. This is the podcast I listened to.
right,
What are the things that the individual is doing that show determination and a commitment to recovery?
right.
So collaborate with the partner on what does he or she want to hear and what do they not, and
Mhm.
know that that can change.
Okay, yeah. Um, I sometimes run into the situation and speak, like, to your point, I've never had access to the partner, so I can't collaborate with her.
Mhm.
And can you speak to the scenario where, uh, I've been working with the recovering guy for maybe 6 months, and I've never met the partner. She has no interest in coming to see me or any other therapist. The attitude is basically, this is your problem, go fix it. And then what I see happen over time is, over 6 months or a year, he's doing really well. He's going to group, he's sober, he's keeping his bottom lines. But it gets very difficult because, she is stuck and she doesn't want to get help. She doesn't want to go to a group, she doesn't want to read a book, you know. And I use the analogy, if you're crossing the road and you get hit by a car, you need to go to the hospital and take your medication and do your physiotherapy and do the work to get better, even though it was terribly unfair and you did nothing to deserve it. But sometimes, like I said, I don't ever meet or speak to a partner. What would you say to maybe a partner's watching this now and they're so angry and stuck in trauma? And I'm not trying to say that in a disrespectful way to partners at all. They're just so stuck, they don't know what to do. What would you say to those partners who just will not or cannot or refuse to get any help or even talk to anyone? I hear about partners that literally don't even talk to anybody,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to them because I think they must be hurting so badly.
Mhm. They are. They are. And there's a lot of shame for partners.
Mm,
It could be, shame that they've observed how other people have been treated. If they speak something private and share it with a friend, perhaps they're in a situation where they don't have friends that they feel safe enough to share this with because they've observed their friends and how they respond to other things.
uh,
Maybe they're in a religious organization that's pretty, strict, and everyone has to be happy all the time, whatever the setting is, or their family upbringing. It could be a variety of things. I think that can be a piece, it can be a hindrance. But partners, if they're betrayed, when they're betrayed, a universal experience is that sense of shame.
mm,
Not only, the shame of what did I do wrong or what's wrong with me, but what's wrong with us. And if
mhm,
anyone knew, they would. And so they're thinking all those things. And that can be a huge barrier to taking the risk, to telling someone. And so any partner right now that's kind of your experience, it's kind of like, this is your thing and you go fix it. And I'm not telling a soul because I don't want them blaming me.
right,
I'm going to say to you, you did not do anything to make this happen.
right.
And we are not saying that there's something wrong with you, so go get help.
Mhm,
What we're saying is something horrific happened to you.
mhm,
And there are people that know how to stand with you through
mhm,
it.
mhm,
We're not here to fix you.
mhm,
Again, nothing wrong with you.
mhm,
Something happened.
mhm.
When I went through this, there was nothing for someone like me.
Yeah,
And when I went and told friends, some of them were wonderful, and some of them said, "Well, why are you so upset? All men, blah, blah, blah."
right.
So I know the fear of coming forward,
Yeah,
but I also knew I wanted to love myself enough to at least have someone walk alongside me as I went through it.
yeah,
Sometimes those of us that are clinicians and coaches, we use words like treatment and
yeah,
counseling and all of that. The main thing most partners need is a listening ear and a safe place, a safe person, so that you can get honest about what it's like for you.
yeah,
So if that's your first step, there's so many safe support groups now that are there just for that, to give you a place where you can be and not have to hide. They give you some information. It's up to you what you do with that information. We're not
yeah,
going to make you do anything, force you to do anything.
yeah.
It's to help you and support you. It's not because something's wrong with you.
What can partners do to heal? Maybe distill it down into, the main 3 or 4 or 5 things.
Mhm.
There is a partner watching right now who's just had their D-Day a week or 2 ago or a month ago, and they're really hurting, and they're like, "What do I do?"
Yeah. The first thing would be to know that there are so many in a very, very similar situation. There's differences, but the similarities are greater. And so
Yeah,
you aren't alone. And so the first step would be don't stay alone.
yeah,
Find at least a friend where you can say, hey, I just want you to know I'm going through a rough time right now. Even if you just do that, you
right.
are opening up into a space where someone else can love you and to care about you. So
Mm,
that's the first thing. Don't walk through this by yourself. We weren't made to walk through these things by ourselves. We were made to be in community. Not all communities safe. So it's wise to be careful.
yeah,
But we do have a lot of really well-trained coaches now, some therapists, we have mentors, we have any variety of safe, caring people who know, many of whom who have been through this, who
mm,
can help walk you through it.
mm,
Then it's working on what's going to help you feel as safe as possible.
mm,
And that's helpful to process with someone on what's going to make you feel safe or help you feel safer.
mm,
We know it's not going to be your loved one for a period of time. He's demonstrated, she's demonstrated they aren't safe right now. That's the reality.
yeah,
And so part of healing is being in reality.
yeah, right,
And it's so difficult for partners when they have family obligations, maybe they have young children. And so it just all seems like there's too much.
mhm.
But
Uh,
there are resources available. And a
Anything
book
you wanna
sometimes,
mention? You
a
wanna
book
mention
is a
any?
lot. I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
sorry, go, any specific you wanna mention, resources?
Absatz is one, and that one, we now have a new cover, it's much prettier.
That's an old, yeah, an old copy, I think.
Yeah, yeah, we have a new cover now. That one's good, it's full of really good information, it can be a little much to read, so when you read, you just read a little bit at a time. There are a lot of really good podcasts, like things like this, sometimes it's a lot easier to take in information hearing it rather than reading it, especially if you're traumatized and your brain is kinda swirling. So APSATS, Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, has a podcast that is excellent. There are other wonderful podcasts out there,
Gonna
but
share
APSATS
your
is
website.
also a place where you can find coaches and therapists
Can we see that,
that specialize.
Barb? Yeah, we can see that on the screen there?
Yeah, right there. See, or it says Recovery Radio.
Yeah,
Yeah,
uh, is
yeah.
this,
There's Jake Porter
oh,
right
Jake,
there.
yeah, I
So
follow him
Jake,
on Instagram, right,
yeah.
okay.
So Jake is now running the AppSats podcast, and the content is rich, both for partners
Mm,
and people working through their addiction. So lots and lots of information. If you are a clinician or a coach and want to learn how to help other people, that's what AppSats was created to do, was to train people to be trauma informed in assisting in the healing process after betrayal and after this kind of trauma.
yeah,
Um, but
there's
we've
Barb
really
there.
grown into people are now doing trainings on how to do a safe, ethical, complete therapeutic disclosure, how to work with children who are impacted. So there's lots and lots of really, really good resources there. I'm so proud to have trained so many people now
Yeah,
um,
I mean, they're
from
all
all
over.
over the world who
Yeah,
are just ready and waiting to be there to support you and help you.
yeah,
And they're safe. They understand trauma. They understand how crazy it can feel, and they know that you aren't crazy, that you're traumatized.
yeah, well, great work in starting that, and, being a pioneer in that, Barb, where there was, basically you saw a need that wasn't being met, and you filled it. You
Yeah.
decided that, somebody needs to do something
Yes.
about this unmet need, and I'm going to do it. So Barb, sometimes you have partners that I'm sure come to you and they've just gone through, a discovery of this secret life, and he's not really taking ownership. He's in denial. He's minimizing his behavior. He's gaslighting her. He's saying it's no big deal, making vague promises of how he'll change. But as time goes on, she finds that he's continuing to act out, and maybe it's a tough situation for her. Maybe they have 3 or 4 young kids. Maybe she's not, maybe she's financially dependent on him, and it's not easy for her to just pick up and leave. What would your counsel be to that person?
That's a very difficult place to be in, and it is very difficult. It's very difficult to make decisions, especially if young children, all of those things. So the first thing I would say again is don't try to figure this out by yourself.
Mhm.
There are lots of people now that can stand with you, walk with you as you are determining what's the best course for you.
Mhm.
Only you can decide that, but it's just helpful having someone asking you questions and helping you refine that for yourself.
Mhm.
And for as you're thinking about if it's, children, how is this might impact your children and how does that play into your decision making? What's your financial reality? So all those things, it's very complicated, and that's why I really don't want you to have to do it alone. So find someone to help you process it. But it really will be helping you determine what are the must-haves for you, what are your greatest values, and how can you stay true to who you want to be.
Right.
So rather than losing even more of yourself, how can you be in a situation, even if it's not separating from this individual, maybe there's other ways of living in that situation where you can be as much you as possible,
Mm.
and focus in on values. So a coach should be wonderful for that, to help you determine what your values are and how are you going to make decisions.
Mhm.
The concern there would be if someone continues an active addiction and doesn't want to change, sometimes their behaviors change. Sometimes they get more abusive, and
Right.
that may be a greater risk for you as well. And so having someone who can listen to what's going on and to help you find as much safety as you can. Sometimes people stay in their addiction and it pretty much stays the same and looks the same, but generally with addiction, it progresses and it gets worse. And
Right.
so a coach or a clinician might ask you, at one point, or what can you do if you get to a place where you don't feel physically safe or your children aren't physically safe? What will you do? So we'd want to help you come up with an action plan for yourself for
Right.
safety. But it really is going to be focusing in on who do you want to be? Because there's no magic in making this person decide all of a sudden. We can hope and we can pray that
Yeah.
someday they will choose,
Yeah.
but there's no guarantee of that. But you can chart a course for yourself that's going to be as consistent as possible for who you want to be. Some partners will say, well, if he's going to keep doing this, then I'm going to go do this. And they make all sorts of plans to get even. And so then I would say, how is that consistent with who you want to be? Is that violating your own values? And is
Right.
that something you want to give away, your values? Or do you want to adhere to your values? So
Right.
it's just working with someone to help you make those kinds of decisions. But
Right.
that safety, consistency, strength, resilience,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things we'd want to be helping you with. And again, I'm going to say it as many times as I can, don't do it alone.
Right.
Contact with someone. But I would be, if I was, coaching you, although I'm not coaching anymore, I would want to be listening for what's your level of safety
Mm.
and how can we improve that?
And just one more question about that. So let's say the partner's with someone who really gaslights and minimizes and is very, very good at emotion, like psychological abuse and manipulation. I didn't say that. That's not what I meant. You must be making that up. This is him talking to her,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
You're crazy. You're overreacting. Everybody does this. Why are you getting so upset?
Mhm.
So that can be, and some men are really, really good at that. And a lot of women sort of, well, they're beaten down by it, or they cave into it, or they're not
Yeah.
sure how to handle it. How can you equip partners to be more resilient to standing up to that?
Well, I think first they have to recognize what's happening.
Mhm.
So working with someone that can help them see that, this is a form of manipulation. It's a form of even emotional abuse, gaslighting can be. And so seeing it for what it is. And then once you can see it, then you can opt out of it. You can say, oh, I've heard this story. I'm just not going to play anymore. So it's just saying, okay, I'm done talking, and then go to another room. Or I'm done talking and sit down. And if he keeps going, then just let him keep going because you know what he's doing. And so
Right,
knowing, being able to recognize it and then to be able to say, I don't have to play this game. I can
right,
go to my room. I can close the door. I can say, I'm done.
right,
And the conversation. And the poll will be, but I want him to understand, but that's not what he wants.
right,
He's not in a place of wanting to understand you right now.
right,
So what are you going to do to protect yourself? That's a longer process than what I just said of learning how to opt out, but that would be the goal. So
yeah,
there's some really good podcasts and YouTube discussions on gaslighting out there that can be really helpful on spotting it so that you can opt out of it.
right,
But it really will be setting boundaries for yourself.
mhm,
Sometimes we think boundaries are about telling someone else what they have to do. A boundary is really, this is this line that I have to protect myself. And if you cross that line, then this is what I'm going to do to
right,
protect me.
right.
So working with someone on what do those boundaries need to look like for you? Again, boundary is not controlling someone else. It's defining what's important to you and how are you going to protect yourself if that boundary is violated.
Okay, one more question. We got time for one more? You wrote
Yeah.
this book in 2009 with
Yeah.
Marshall Lees. So that's 14
A
years.
long time.
And the world has changed. I mean, the smartphone wasn't even around when you wrote that book. And that has completely changed the whole world of accessing pornography and dating apps and sexting and all that. So let's say before you um, fully retire, you want to write a revised edition of your sexually addicted spouse with an updated version. Let's say, what would you? Is there anything you would sort of add to it? An extra chapter you put in there, or something from the 14 years of experience that you've had since then that you would want people to know?
Well, certainly we could update all the ways that people now have to access material, but when someone wants access to material, smartphone or not, they're going to figure it out.
Right,
So, um, so I would just say that we have, now we're going to have virtual reality and all the other things that are out there. So I think in essence, it's the same. And
mm,
this is trauma and
mhm,
how to help yourself. There are
mm,
more resources now. We did do a little tiny bit of an update in 2021. We changed the cover. We changed resources because those have changed, updated
okay.
that a little bit. I would probably want to talk more to the person of color who's experiencing this
Oh,
because we don't have a lot of, research that shows um, similarities, differences. What we see is it's the same, but there may be some cultural things that make it difficult to find some support, not just for people of color, for men who are betrayed. There's not enough resources for them. No one's doing research on that. If anyone's listening who wants to do research, there's your area.
right,
How is a betrayed male experience different from a female, or is it? So
right.
just looking at that. So different people groups, I think, might be something we'd want to talk about. Um, but I think in reality, the experience is the same regardless of how the sexual behaviors are accessed.
Right.
One thing that I do see over the years I've been doing this work is the abuse has increased.
What do you mean?
I think perhaps because some of the content people are accessing is more violent. I'm finding, and we just had a colleague do some research about levels of domestic violence, domestic abuse when someone's in a relationship with a sex addict. So physical, emotional, sexual abuse within the relationship is very high now.
Okay.
When there's sex addiction, it's not like it's an automatic, but it's enough.
Right.
My There's no research. My belief is because it's just so easy to access so many different things now, and people can accelerate in their level of addiction
Yeah.
much quicker
Right.
um, with online pornography and things like that, and access to things. So, I am more concerned about levels of abuse in the relationships.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'd want to attend to that more in terms of
That's,
safety seeking, finding safety for yourself.
mm, yeah,
We
that
now
makes
have
sense.
coaches that specialize in that. We have coaches that specialize when it's high conflict relationships and divorces.
Okay.
Um, People, how to help through a court process, the court system, if that ends up being, your
Yeah.
journey.
Okay.
So, so it's wonderful now. There are many more resources, but I am concerned about increased abuse, increased violence.
Well, it makes sense when you watch violent porn, it decreases your empathy in
Yeah,
general. Makes you
yeah,
more callous, I think, and unfeeling. So
yes.
it seems like the logical outcome of that. Um,
Mhm.
so, well, thanks, Barb. I'll put the link up in the notes as well for AppSat, so anyone watching this can access AppSats, the podcast, uh,
Mhm.
the book.
Yeah.
Any other colleagues that podcasts or resources that come to mind, or
I would just refer to AppSats because we have so many that I would leave somebody out and that wouldn't be fine.
right, okay,
I would be
that's
very sad. The other thing I want people to know too is that there's a part of AppSats now that's focusing in on helping the religious communities respond better in more trauma-informed ways.
okay,
So it's called Betrayal Trauma Religious Leader Training. So
okay,
that could be for Christian organizations. We have some for Orthodox Jewish focus. So really wanting to help our faith
great.
communities do a better job and reduce harm there. So if that's an area of interest, there's information on AppSat's website about that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome because it's really needed, and a lot of well-meaning Christians in leadership there, they just don't have the language, or
Yeah.
the vocabulary for that, and they generally mean well, but often um, do more harm actually unwittingly and re-traumatize partners. And therapists do that. If you're a therapist watching this, and a couple comes to you, please stop telling her it's no big deal.
Mhm.
She should have more sex. She should watch porn with her husband.
Yeah.
Everyone does it. Don't say that, please, anymore to partners because you're gaslighting them and they're coming to you for help and you're going to re-traumatize them. So I hope if you're working in mental health, that you really take that to heart and are open to understanding the betrayal trauma model that partners go through. So, okay, well, thank you. I think we'll wrap it up there. It's been a good 90 minutes, so I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. But thank you so much for sharing your time and your
You're
expertise,
welcome. Yeah.
and for all the work that you've done and leading the way, and the training all of these therapists to help. Because this is a big problem and it's only going to get any bigger. So it's just really good to know that there's help out there for partners. So thank you, and hope we'll talk again.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for all the things you are doing.
Okay, thanks, Barb. Bye.